Welcome back. Today we are diving deep into a single, really explosive moment. It's something that has, frankly, haunted the legacy of Marcus Garvey for a century.
Absolutely. Garvey was, undeniably one of the most influential Black leaders of the 20th century. The UNIA, his organization, at its peak, nearly 6 million members globally, all focused on Black self-determination.
A massive movement. Yet, like you said, for 100 years, his name has been tangled up with this damaging question. Was Marcus Garvey an anti-Semite?
Exactly. And we've got historical documents, primary sources, that let us peel back the layers on that infamous 1923 mail fraud conviction. And, well, they reveal a story that looks much more like political warfare than a straightforward legal case.
Yeah, many historians now argue it was essentially a political hit job designed to silence him.
Yeah.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to really unpack those original charges.
And to detail the government conspiracy, frankly, led by J. Edgar Hoover, we'll also look at the surprising counter-narrative, the story of his Jewish allies.
Right, and trace the path all the way to the recent acknowledgement of this injustice, including President Biden's posthumous pardon. Okay, let's get into this. It's crucial.
To understand the accusation, the fury behind it, we actually need to start with the respect that came before. Before the trial, before that explosion, Garvey often spoke with great admiration for Jewish enterprise, for their solidarity.
He saw them as a model.
Yes, exactly. He held them up as a model for group unity, for thrift, resilience. He urged Black people to, replicate those strategies for their own liberation, for economic strength.
So he saw common ground there. A shared struggle, maybe.
He did. But that perspective, it just pivoted dramatically in May 1923, right after the guilty verdict in that mail fraud trial.
And for Garvey, this wasn't just, oh, I lost a court case. This felt like the intentional destruction of his life's work.
Yeah.
Specifically, the Black Star Line, his shipping company.
That's the absolute turning point, the moment of devastation. And in his immediate reaction, furious, just lashing out, he wrote something explosive.
He named names.
He did. He singled out 3 individuals he saw as his destroyers. He wrote, "I am being punished for the crime of the Jew, Silverstone, prosecuted by another Jew, Maxwell Maddock, and to be sentenced by Judge Julian Mack, the eminent Jewish jurist."
Wow. And that outburst, that specific lashing out, it happened during what was arguably the absolute darkest moment of his life, a total political and personal defeat.
Which forces us, and you listening, to ask a really tough question.
Would you want your entire life's work, your whole legacy, judged by your single lowest moment, your point of deepest rage and fury?
Because that's precisely the historical trap Garvey's legacy fell into for 100 years. Based on that one quote, often taken out of context.
And you mentioned context. That rage, that feeling of betrayal wasn't happening in a vacuum, right? There was this coordinated attack.
Oh, absolutely. We can document it. Marcus Garvey was the target of an organized conspiracy, spearheaded by J. Edgar Hoover, who was then leading the Bureau of Investigation's Intelligence Division.
This was the federal government actively trying to take him down.
Without a doubt. We have memos, documents showing Hoover calling Garvey a dangerous Negro agitator way back in 1919. He explicitly told his agents, find a pretext, any pretext, prosecute him, deport him.
And they focused on the Black Star Line.
They did. Hoover even hired Black informants, sent them inside the UNIA to dig up dirt, find any evidence of fraud or wrongdoing they could use.
And this government pressure found allies, surprisingly, within the Black community itself.
That's right, the Garvey Must Go campaign. It was a coalition of, well, rival Black integrationist leaders, people like W.E.B. Du Bois, A. Philip Randolph, members of the NAACP.
So his ideological opponents.
Yes. And they publicly denounced him, sure, but they also shared information about his business dealings directly with Hoover's investigators. They kind of leveraged the government's case.
So his rivals were using the federal investigation to undermine his separatist movement. But here's where the whole idea of a clear, just conviction just completely unravels for me. The jurors themselves, the people who actually convicted him, just 3 years later, 9 out of the 12 signed an affidavit.
Urging President Coolidge to commute his sentence.
Exactly. They realized there was a profound injustice at the heart of the case they had just decided.
That is staggering. Think about that. 9 out of 12 jurors recanting, essentially. It really forces you to confront the reality of the betrayal Garvey must have felt.
Right. Targeted by rivals, targeted by the government. How would you respond? After spending years building hope for literally millions of people around the world, The rage, maybe not justified, but it certainly gains context.
It does. And that moment of rage, that quote, it often overshadows decades of, well, alliance and mutual respect. The relationship between Garvey and Jewish community leaders was way more complex than that one outburst suggests.
There were supporters, Jewish supporters.
Absolutely. Significant ones, especially back in Jamaica where he started. He benefited from Jewish patronage.
Yeah.
Figures like Abraham Judah, a key early supporter, and the Ashenheim family, very respected.
And crucially, Louis Ashenheim, a prominent lawyer from that family.
He provided Garvey legal counsel and support after the 1923 conviction, after the infamous outburst.
Wait, so prominent Jewish leaders, lawyers, they continued to support him, legally and politically, after he publicly singled out those individuals in anger.
Yes.
What does that tell us? Is it just his anger was seen as specific, maybe emotional, not ideological anti-Semitism, right?
That's exactly what historians argue. This ongoing support, before and after, shows the relationship wasn't defined by that conflict. The Jewish individuals involved in the trial. Historians mostly agree their presence reflected the professional landscape of New York City lawyers and judges at the time, not some organized anti-Garvey plot by the community.
So his accusations were personal, emotional, driven by that sense of betrayal against specific people he felt had wronged him.
Precisely, not a reflection of some deep-seated anti-Jewish ideology.
Okay, let's nail down the charge itself, mail fraud. It sounds serious, but what was it actually based on?
It's centered on the claim that fraudulent material about the Black Star Line was sent through the mail, but the star piece of evidence, the physical proof, used to show a technical violation. It was famously called one empty envelope.
One empty envelope. Seriously?
That was the linchpin for the technical mail fraud charge. It sounds almost absurd.
It does. But even beyond the flimsy evidence, the trial itself seems problematic. The judge, Julian Mack.
An eminent Jewish jurist, as Garvey called him. Garvey actually tried to get him recused, citing perceived bias.
And the bias wasn't just perception, was it? Judge Mack had ties to the NAACP.
Deep ties. He was a founder and a financial contributor to the NAACP.
The same organization leading the Garvey Must Go campaign, his chief organizational rival.
The very same. That's not just potential bias, that's a massive conflict of interest right at the heart of the trial.
Yet Mack refused to step aside.
He denied the recusal petition. And it gets worse. There was perjury. Admitted perjury.
What happened there?
A key witness for the prosecution, an office boy named Sheeler Cargill, he admitted under oath during cross-examination that the prosecutor, Maxwell Maddock, one of the men Garvey later named, had told him to lie on the stand.
The prosecutor told him to lie. And this came out in court.
It did. And Judge Mack, he basically failed to address this admission of suborned perjury. Just let it slide.
So let me get this straight. The evidence is incredibly thin, hinging on an empty envelope. The judge has a direct conflict of interest with Garvey's main rivals. The prosecution's key witness admits he was told to lie by the prosecutor, and the guilty verdict still stood.
It stood. The prosecution, led by Maddock, was relentless. And Maddock's closing argument really tells you everything about their strategy.
What did he say?
He played on fear, dehumanized Garvey, he urged the jury, "Gentlemen, will we set the tiger loose?"
Calling him a tiger. Wow.
Framing him not as a potentially flawed businessman, but as this dangerous, wild animal threatening social order.
So let's look at the actual business side, the Black Star Line's failures. Was it all calculated fraud or something else?
Well, the reality seems more complex. There was definitely some financial mismanagement internally, poor decisions were made, but the BSL was also targeted. It faced market fluctuations, it seems some internal officers cheated the company, and external predators took advantage.
Which brings us back to Edwin Silverstone, the man Garvey specifically blamed.
Right. Silverstone, sometimes spelled Silverstein, was a financial officer. Garvey accused him of creating the financial mess, the faulty documents that the prosecutors then used. He saw Silverstone as the insider who ruined the company, setting him up for the fall.
And the SS Orion deal, that was central.
It was. The ship was intended to be renamed the SS Phyllis Wheatley. The BSL put down a big deposit, $22,500, but the deal collapsed.
And the charge was that Garvey advertised the ship to sell stock before the deal was actually final.
Essentially, yes. That was the basis of the fraud claim. But again, context matters. The failure wasn't just internal.
How so?
The Department of Justice was actively monitoring Garvey. And the U.S. Shipping Board, which had to approve the final sale, delayed that approval for months, possibly due to pressure from the DOJ. They delayed until the whole deal just fell apart.
Providing the proof the prosecution needed.
Exactly. So Garvey's fury, again, it targeted those specific individuals. Mack, Maddox, Silverstone. He saw them as the agents of his destruction. Which brings up that moral check again. Can the actions of a few people, a judge, a prosecutor, an employee, justify condemning an entire community or group?
It's a crucial distinction. And we have to look beyond that single moment of rage in 1923. What happened later? Did Garvey maintain that stance?
No, quite the opposite. About a decade later, he wrote an editorial. In it, he fiercely condemned anti-Semitism. He called the Jewish race noble and explicitly stated that persecuting Jewish people was just as wrong as persecuting black people. No different.
So his later writings directly contradict the idea that he held an anti-Jewish ideology.
They do. It confirms what most historians conclude. Anti-Semitism wasn't a core part, not a structural element of Garveyism. But you know what was structural? The political machine used against him.
The Garvey Must Go campaign.
Yes. Their role was crucial. By publicly siding with the Department of Justice, by framing Garvey as this radical threat to, quote, harmonious race relationships, they essentially gave Hoover's actions a cover, a legitimacy they wouldn't have otherwise had.
They provided a facade of consensus from within the black community for his elimination.
Which is a devastating historical pattern, isn't it? Suppressing black leadership using legal tools, covert operations. It foreshadows later government programs like COINTELPRO.
It really does. And it raises a big question for us today, looking back. If this kind of political injustice repeats itself throughout history, used to shut down competing ideas, how do we build a future where those ideas get a fair hearing, where they're tested honestly, not sabotaged by the state or powerful interests?
A fundamental question. Fortunately, in Garvey's case, history did eventually bend somewhat toward justice, even if it took nearly a century. The government itself finally acknowledged the wrong.
It started relatively early, didn't it, with President Coolidge?
Surprisingly early, yes. In 1927, Coolidge commuted Garvey's sentence. He didn't pardon him, but he cut the sentence short, which ironically led directly to Garvey's deportation as an undesirable alien. But it was an implicit acknowledgement that the maximum sentence was excessive.
But the full acknowledgement, the pardon, came much, much later.
Much later. Just recently, in January 2025, President Joe Biden granted Marcus Garvey a posthumous pardon, and the language was explicit, recognizing the prosecution itself as an injustice rooted in political hostility.
So the historical consensus is now pretty clear.
It is. Garvey's conviction was a miscarriage of justice. It was politically motivated to silence a leader whose movement, frankly, represented a massive threat to the American status quo, to segregation, to white supremacy.
So what's the main takeaway here? For you listening, what should you hold on to from this deep dive?
I think the most crucial thing is this. Never, ever judge a massive, complex legacy by a single lowest moment, especially when that moment was triggered by years of targeted government conspiracy and profound personal and political betrayal.
It's a powerful reminder about how narratives get shaped, right? How power can manipulate stories to crush competition, to eliminate ideas that doesn't like.
Absolutely. We always need to seek the full story. Ask the hard questions. Who benefits from simplifying history? Whose interests are served by framing someone as purely a hero or purely a villain?
The truth is usually much more complex, much more nuanced. That's our deep dive for today. We really encourage you to keep digging, keep seeking the full story.
Because it's always out there, waiting to be uncovered. Until next time.